Today we're talking about the Reformation. And as I explained last week, my laptop died 2 years ago when I was, and I lost all my PowerPoints for the Reformation. So we're kind of winging it, but I do have some notes. And I think what I want to finish up the Reformation with is the wars of religion. I want to review a couple things. Hey, good to see you. Hello, welcome. Somebody said they wanted to read this book. I can't remember who raised their hand. It's The Great Emergence by Phyllis Tickle. Who's not here? How Christianity is changing and why. Excellent book. She's the one that came, she's a religious studies scholar. She's the one that came up with the theory of the 500-year steps of God through history, in which she says in the year zero, Christ was born, and that was a major change, paradigm change, a revolution spiritually. In the year 500, the Roman Empire was collapsing, and slightly before that, St. Augustine wrote City of God, and the Catholic Church would begin, the Roman Catholic Church began to emerge out of the ruins of the collapsing Roman Empire in 1056. Is that correct, Sean? I think it is. 1056, the Great Schism. 1054. So 1054 was the Great Schism in which the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic separated over the definition of the Filioque. And then in 1517 comes Martin Luther and the 95 Theses and the Protestant Reformation. According to her theory, we are due for another major revolution or paradigm change in Christianity. And as I'm kind of reviewing her, hello, your name is
Grace. Grace.
Grace. Good to see you. So her theory is, if her theory is right, we're due for a major change, shift in Christianity, in which there will be a new approach to authority. I just realized I don't have any of my rings on. I took them off for an MRI on Monday, and I keep forgetting to put them back on. Yes.
That's like you were saying. I mean, restrictions and authority give power. And aren't there like so many different denominations that now you gotta really even follow?
She defines it like this, like in the Reformation, the basic shift in authority was from, are you listening to something, Sean? Huh? It's okay. I'm just curious. I mean, it was kind of distracting for me, but it's fine. No, you already know all this stuff, so you're more than welcome to go sit in the back and listen. No, you don't need to apologize. I embarrassed you. I apologize. I used to be a inveterate multitasker myself. I just am too old to do that now. But you're still young and vigorous. Um, so, so let me see if I can answer your question. What is your name?
Ivan.
Yvonne. That's right. You're in my other class, American History. So, in the Protestant Reformation, what was the change in authority?
The Catholic Church was corrupt, so Martin Luther sort of started to shift towards Lutheranism, and then King Henry VIII with the
Well,
Anglican.
that's all good and true, but that's not what I'm asking. And as far as Catholic Church being corrupt, let's say it a little differently. The Catholic Church had a lot of corruption,
Okay, yeah.
rather than characterizing it as entirely corrupt. There were a lot of good people of good faith in the Catholic Church who wanted to reform the church and wished that Luther had been able to do that and remain a Catholic. But the issue in the Catholic Church of authority is the authority was in the hierarchy. The authority was in the papacy and what's called the magisterium. The magisterium is the body of teaching over the ages that the theologians and cardinals of the Catholic Church have developed in conjunction with the papacy. That's your source of authority. Tradition is also a really important source of authority. So the papacy, tradition, the hierarchy, not the scriptures. So the major paradigm shift that Luther came up with was, oh my God, sola scriptura and sola fide, which means, thank you. You're my Google, you're my AI, open AI here. I appreciate it. Yeah, only by faith. Whereas the Catholic Church would say it's the sacraments and faith and works, good works. So there's a dispute over theology, but the central issue that Phyllis Tickle identifies is the issue of authority. So the authority in 1517, and of course I'm picking one day, but it began 150 years earlier with John Huss, and it continued 150 years afterwards with the Wars of Religion, which I hope to talk about today. So it's a 300-year process. But there was a gradual shift of authority away from the tradition, away from the papacy, away from the magisterium to the Bible. I don't have a Bible with me, or I'd hold up a Bible. I'd hold up the King James Bible because I have one that my parents gave me in 1963 when I went forward at a Billy Graham crusade in Columbus, Ohio. They signed my name in it. Hi, how are you? So um, the reigning, and of course now we're talking about more or less Protestant, because in Catholicism there was an adjustment in their views at the Counter Reformation and later in Vatican II about faith, and they have made some changes to approach more the Protestant point of view in some areas. So the Catholic theologian would not deny that faith is a central part of salvation, but they would also say we also need tradition and we need the papacy, the magisterium, in order to properly interpret Scripture. So they've come to a more balanced approach. Most Protestants would say we need the Bible. In fact, more extreme, um, how do I put this? I want to put this properly. Some Protestants who tend to be more literal would say, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. The problem with that is God said what God said. When you read it, you may say, well, he didn't say that. He's saying this. So the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so is the translation or the understanding. The devil's in the details and the proof is in the pudding. The last one doesn't really work because we don't have pudding. It sounds good. It was kind of poetic. So the problem is among Protestants is who gets to determine which interpretation is correct. You have an interpretation, I have an interpretation, Sean has an interpretation, you have an interpretation, and they may only slightly deviate, but those slight deviations can wind up in being different denominations. We already talked about the fact that many times denominational splits are over politics and ego, not necessarily entirely scripture. But often they are over scripture interpretation and theology. Uh, so I personally know, and I know of people that I haven't met, like Christian Smith, who was a sociologist at Notre Dame, and I read a number of his books and really enjoyed his scholarship, Christian Smith. And he wrote a book called The Bible Made Biblicism, The Bible Made Impossible, in which he critiqued the Protestant approach to interpretation of Scripture and basically said the Protestant idea that Scripture is plain and common sense and everyone can interpret it and everyone's going to arrive at the true interpretation just doesn't hold up. It's not plain. You do need scholarship. You do need the original language, Greek or Hebrew. You do need a community to help you interpret it. And you probably need to take a look at tradition to see how it's been interpreted through the ages. And so, what Phyllis Tickle's saying is this idea of sola scriptura is breaking down. It just doesn't hold up in the face of Protestant fragmentation. So, are we going to go back to a Catholic view or we'll just let the Pope decide? Probably not either. And so now there's a problem with scriptural authority, and you have multitudes of Gen Z and millennials who are no longer active in Christian institutions. My own feeling is that many of them are still Christians, but just lost faith in the institutions. Even a few boomers have. I'm uh, I'm cool, man. I identify I identify as a Miami millennial Latino guy who can really hoop it up in basketball. Now the problem is it doesn't help. It doesn't work. But I identify. It makes me feel good because I hang out with a lot of millennials. I My kids were millennials. I studied hard how to communicate with millennials, how to understand the way they think, not you. Now I got to do it all over again with Gen Z, starting with my grandkids. Anyway, uh, so I kind of count myself among some of the millennials and Gen Zs who've lost faith in institutions. And this is what Phyllis Tickler says happens at the end of an era, is that faith in institutions starts to break down. Some articles of faith no longer make sense. That anomalies, which are like self-contradictions, start to multiply. And this, I also get some of this vocabulary from, I can't remember the author's name, The Structures of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. He wrote in the 50s, and he came up with the term paradigm change, um, anomalies, and he was talking about scientific theories. So there came a point where Newtonian physics no longer worked, that there were things in physics that were not explainable by Newtonian physics. And those anomalies began to pile up over 100 years. And suddenly, at some point, along comes Albert Einstein with a new theory that explains a bunch of stuff that Newtonian physics didn't. That's kind of what happens with these 500-year revolutions. And you could say in Christianity, you could also say in Western civilization. And so we're now on the cusp, perhaps, of a crisis of authority. And we could talk about that the rest of the period. What is that crisis of authority? Who gets to decide what is meaningful, what is true? Does J.D. Vance get to decide? Does Shane Claiborne get to decide? Does Joseph Holbrook get to decide on Wednesdays at 2? She says I should just go ahead and decide. Save us all a lot of work. Every man has to be a philosopher. Every woman has to be a philosopher in the modern era. We all have to think it through. We can't just trust sources that are handed to us necessarily. So I've gone on about that a little bit. Is the person here who wanted the great emergence here yet? Were you the one? Sharonda? Okay. Let me see if my name is in it. Actually, I might just give this to you. You want to write my name in it for me?
Yes.
Or bring me a pen and I'll write to Sharonda from Joseph in the year. Yeah, last year I gave away a bunch of books from my life. You have a pen? I gave away a bunch of books, and I'm going to try to do that again this year as soon as I can dig through the storage space to get to my books. And because I don't want to leave my kids the hassle of having to go through it all. How do you spell Sharonda?
Sharondo.
25. Enjoy. There, you remember me for that. This is your book now, because I don't think I'll need it again. I've got notes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me know what you think. Okay, so the Protestant Reformation was a clash of different concepts of authority, not only theological, between the Catholic view of the magisterium and the hierarchy. That was a big one. A lot, that Luther was protesting corruption among the hierarchy. In the beginning, he wasn't necessarily opposed to much of the doctrine of the Catholic Church, except for some doctrines that were not well founded, like the doctrine of indulgences. And he tried to appeal to the cardinal and say this is a spurious interpretation of the treasure chest of the saints. But the church, the hierarchy was making money off of it, so they didn't want to back off of it. And so this was a clash of authority, but not just theological authority. It was also a clash of political authority, because German princes were getting restless under the thumb of the Pope in Rome, and there was nationalism was on the rise. So if you watch that movie Luther, you'll hear in one of the places where they're protesting and burning books, one of the guys in the crowd says, "German money for the German church." And they don't want to be sending their tithes and their offerings down to Rome. They want to keep it in Germany. So that's another factor. It's not just religious or theological. Now, I'm getting to the point where I do a lot of winging. I enjoy that more. Okay, so let me go over some facts and figures if I can do it. I can't do it because this is in the way. The Wars of Religion. I might have it here, but I didn't want to bring it up here because Sean will point out that it's from Chat GPT. However, I'm not turning it in for a grade. I just remind everyone, I'm just saving myself time. I could have gone to Google and copied and pasted it, but I didn't. Oh, this thing's got to turn. Okay, so let me go here. I pulled up some data about the wars of religion, and it's pretty startling. It's worse than I thought it was. I knew it was bad. And in your module, I think there's a couple of videos if you want to watch on the French Wars of Religion, particularly Saint Bartholomew's Day massacre in France, which was 1588, I think. But in the French Wars of Religion from 1562 to 1598, 2 to 4 million people died. Now I want us to sit on this for a moment. 4 million people. Let's go with the higher numbers for the shock value. 4 million people dead because they disagreed about theology, religion. They disagreed about who to have their allegiance to the New Testament, to the scriptures, or to the Roman Catholic Church. Of course, religion has to do with identity. And identity is tribal. It's not just purely spiritual. This makes me think of some of our conversations last week, about Christianity. This is the ugly. I call this class my good, bad, and ugly class on Christianity, because in history, and all of history, Yvonne is in my American history class, and there's a lot of good in American history. There's a lot of bad in American history, and there's a little bit of ugly. And that's true of every country. That's true of the human condition on earth. No one has their hands clean. There are no good guys except for maybe Jesus. I'm a believer, so I believe Jesus was without sin, but that's it. Gandhi was not without sin. Neither was George Washington. Neither is Martin Luther. Okay, name some others. Mother Teresa had her quirks, maybe a little worse than quirks. She could be hard on people. So the good, bad, and ugly doesn't. It's not a condemnation of Christianity. It's just a reality of any religion and any civilization. So the total number is estimated to be between 5 and 18 million in all the wars of religion. This is after Martin Luther nailed his thesis to the church door, if that actually happened. That could be apocryphal. How many of you actually saw the movie? Some of you I know did. It's a great movie. I've watched it I don't know how many times. Do you remember when his mentor was giving him a haircut with a straight razor? And his mentor said, Martin, I didn't mean for you to go. I sent you out. I didn't mean for you to tear up the. And he grabs his hand. I thought that was a good bit of acting. He grabs his mentor's hand so he doesn't accidentally cut his throat. And he said, "Did you think there would be no violence?" I think it's an intense scene. And then later, and near the end of the movie, when Catherine von Bora, the nun who kind of wants to marry the alpha male, Luther, who's the head of all this, all the other nuns spoken for, and she said, Doctor Luther, when are you going to ask me? She basically proposed to him, and I love his response because I'm kind of a melancholic person when I'm not in a classroom. I can be a little depressive at times, not severely, but a little bit. I kind of see all the bad stuff going on around me, and I complain a lot. And so he says, Catherine, you don't want to be with me. Most mornings I'm depressed. Most mornings I'm so depressed I can't even get out of bed. I'm a man of blood. I thought that was a beautiful scene. I don't know if it actually happened or if he actually said that or if he was that self-aware. But Martin Luther, he was a reformer and he was passionately for justice. But his actions kicked off 150 years of 18 million, possibly 18 million deaths. Many, many things in the field of religion and politics, but we're focusing on religion here, have unintended consequences. And we think, okay, this needs to happen, and then we have no idea what the actual consequences might be. I don't know that he intended for his translation of the Bible to turn into such strong individualism in the modern secular world. And I don't know what he would have thought if he realized that the Protestant Reformation would eventually involve thousands of Protestant denominations with different interpretations. I don't know what he would have thought. And none of us do know the outcomes of our actions. But the violence that came from that is because there was a huge conflict in authority, political authority, religious authority, and let's just pause there. The 30 Years' War, before I pause, that was the French Wars of Religion, 1562 to 1598. The 30 Years' War, which is oddly named because why would they name it like that? The 30 Years' War, because it was 30 years long. I didn't pull that off right. I could do it better in my world history classes. But they named it a very obvious name, 1618 to 1648. That ended with the Peace of Westphalia, which began the current international order that we live in and the system of secular nation states. Under Luther, and I can't pronounce it because of the SCH, Samal called, you know how to pronounce that? Samal called, something or other. I can't even remember the phrase. But there was some warfare right after Luther in the 1530s, after he was still alive, and they resolved it. They In the movie you see the princes. Luther was not allowed in the room, but the German princes went before the Holy Roman Emperor, and he demanded that they swear loyalty to him or fealty, and that they take mass and the Catholic and the Roman rite with him, and they refused. And they bowed down on their knees and exposed their necks, and they said, "You can cut our heads off, but we're not. We like our conscience. We refuse to do that." And so that was in the 1530s. So they came up with an agreement as a result of that, in which they agreed that every nation would be ruled by the conscience of its ruler. So the king of Sweden was Lutheran, and so if you were Swedish, you'd be a Lutheran. It didn't really matter if you wanted to be Catholic or Calvinist, you were Lutheran because your king was Lutheran. And the same thing in Great Britain, actually wasn't Great Britain yet, in England. The King of England was Catholic at first and then later became Church of England. You were whatever your king was. And that was the compromise they reached, which was a compromise on authority. Then by 1648, they realized even that wasn't going to work. And so they realized they had to get religion out of the public sphere, and they had to let nations be secular nation states. And so they came up with the Peace of Westphalia. Now we're coming to the end of a period of secularism and liberalism. By liberalism, I don't mean Democrats, I mean Adam Smith and classical liberalism, the idea of individual rights and individuality and freedom, checks and balances. That's classical liberalism. And we're coming to an end of the period where that worked. Pluralism, democracy, globalism. We're coming to what's called the post-liberal period. And a lot of people are questioning that order and wanting to go back to a stronger religious point of view, not just Christian. India, um, Israel, there's a Russia has become very Russian Orthodox. It always was, but under the communists, Soviet Union, they tried to stamp it out. But now uh, is very much an Orthodox Russian Orthodox Christian in his identity. That's not to say he's a follower of Jesus, but that's his identity. So you have countries now going back to their religious roots. Why? Let me pause there and give you some time for some uh, comments. One other thing is the Civil War in England, which was about 1630 through the 1640s, and resulted in the dictatorship of what's his name,